My lords, if you would hear a high tale of love and of death, here is that of Tristan and Queen Iseult, how to their full joy, but to their sorrow also, they loved each other, and how at last they died of that love together upon one day, she by him and he by her. My lords, there were in the court of King Mark 4 barons, the basest of men, who hated Tristan with a hard hate for his greatness and for the tender love the king bore him. They knew that the king had intent to grow old childless and to leave his land to Tristan, and their envy swelled, and by lies they angered the chief men of Cornwall against Tristan. They said, "There have been too many marvels in this man's life, but you are men of wit, my lords, and without doubt you can explain them. It was marvel enough that he beat the Morholt, but by what sorcery did he try the sea alone at the point of death? Or which of us, my lords, could voyage without mast or sail? They say that warlocks can. It was sure a warlock feat, and this is a warlock harp of his, pours poison daily into the king's heart. See how he has bent that heart by power and chain of sorcery. He will be king yet, my lords, and you will hold your lands of a wizard." They brought over the greater part of the barons, for most men are unaware that what is in the power of magicians to accomplish, that the heart also can accomplish by dint of love and bravery. These barons pressed King Mark to take to wife some king's daughter who should give him an heir, or else they threatened to return each man into his keep and wage him war. But the king turned against them, and swore in his heart that so long as his dear nephew lived, no king's daughter should come to his bed. Then in his turn did Tristan, in his shame to be thought to serve for hire, threaten that if the king did not yield to his barons, he would himself go over sea and serve some great king. At this, King Mark made a term with his barons and gave them 40 days to hear his decision. On the appointed day he waited alone in his chamber and sadly mused, "Where shall I find a king's daughter so fair and yet so distant that I may feign to wish her my wife?" Just then by his window that looked upon the sea, 2 building swallows came in quarreling together. Then startled they flew out, but had let fall from their beaks a woman's hair, long and fine, and shining like a beam of light. King Mark took it and called his barons and Tristan and said, "To please you, my lords, I will take a wife, but you must seek her whom I have chosen." "Fair lord, we wish it all," they said, "and who may she be?" "Why," said he, "she whose hair this is, nor will I take another." "And whence, Lord King, comes this hair of gold? Who brought it, and from what land?" "It comes, my lord, from the lady with the hair of gold. The swallows brought it me. They know from what country it came." Then the barons saw themselves mocked and cheated, and they turned with sneers to Tristan, for they thought him to have counselled the trick. But Tristan, when he had looked on the hair of gold, remembered Iseult the fair, and smiled and said this, "King Mark, can you not see that the doubts of these lords shame me? You have designed in vain. I will go seek the lady with the hair of gold. The search is perilous. Nevertheless, my uncle, I would once more put my body and my life into peril for you, and that your barons may know I love you loyally. I take this oath, to die on the adventure, or to bring back to this castle of Tintagel the queen with that fair hair." So, for the love of King Mark, did Tristan by guile and by force conquer the queen of the hair of gold. When the day of Iseult's livery to the lords of Cornwall drew near, her mother gathered herbs and flowers and roots and steeped them in wine, and brewed a potion of might, and having perfected it by science and magic, she poured it into a pitcher and set apart to Brangian, "Child, It is yours to go with Iseult to King Mark's country, for you love her with a faithful love. Take then this picture, and remember well my words. Hide it, so that no eye shall see, nor no lips go near it. But when the wedding night has come, and that moment in which the wedded are left alone, pour this essenced wine into a cup, and offer it to King Mark, and to Iseult his queen. Oh, take all care, my child, that they alone shall taste this brew. For this is its power. They who drink of it together love each other with their every single sense and with their every thought, forever in life and in death. And Brangian promised the queen that she would do her bidding. The ship, ploughing the deep waves, bore off Iseult. The farther it bore her from the soil of Ireland, the more sadly the young girl bewailed her lot. Seated under the tent in which she had secluded herself with Brangian her maid, she wept, remembering her land. Where were these strangers dragging her? Towards whom? Towards what fate? When Tristan approached her and sought to soothe her with soft words, she angered, repulsed him, and hate swelled her heart. He had come to Ireland, he the ravisher, he the murderer of the Morholt. With guile he had torn her from her mother and her land. He had not deigned to keep her for himself, and now he was carrying her away as his prey over the waves to the land of the enemy. Accursed be the sea that bears me, for rather would I lie dead on the earth where I was born than to live out there beyond. One day, when the wind had fallen and the sails hung slack, Tristan dropped anchor by an island, and the 100 knights of Cornwall and the sailors, weary of the sea, landed all. Iseult alone remained aboard, and a little serving maid, when Tristan came near the queen to calm her sorrow. The sun was hot above them, and they were athirst. And as they called, the little maid looked about for drink for them, and found that pitcher which the mother of Iseult had given into Brangian's keeping. And when she came on it, the child cried, "I have found you wine." Now she had found not wine, but passion and joy most sharp, and anguish without end, and death. The child filled a goblet and presented it to her mistress. The queen drank deep of that draught and gave it to Tristan, and he drank also long, and emptied it all. Brangian came in upon them. She saw them gazing at each other in silence as though ravished and apart. She saw the almost emptied pitcher standing there before them, and a goblet. She snatched up the pitcher and cast it into the shuddering sea and cried, "Cursed be the day I was born, and cursed the day that first I trod this deck. Iseult, my friend, and Tristan, you have drunk death together." And once more the bark ran free for Tintagel, but it seemed to Tristan as though an ardent briar, sharp-thorned but with the flower most sweet-smelling, drave roots into his blood, and laced the lovely body of Iseult all round about it, and bound it to his own and to his every thought and desire. And he thought, "Fair uncle, who loved me orphaned, ere ever you knew in me the blood of your sister Blanchefleur, why did you not drive out the boy that was to betray you? Ah, what a thought was that! Iseult is yours, and I am but your vassal. Iseult is yours, and I am your son. Iseult is yours, and may not love me." But Iseult loved him, though she would have hated. Had he not basely disdained her, she could not hate, for a tenderness more sharp than hatred tore her. And Brangian watched them in anguish, suffering more cruelly because she alone knew the depth of evil done. 2 days she watched them, seeing them refuse all food or comfort, and seeking each other as blind men seek, wretched apart and together more wretched still, for then they trembled each for the first avowal. On the 3rd day, as Tristan neared the tent on the deck where Iseult sat, she saw him coming, and she said to him very humbly, "Come in, my lord." Queen, said Tristan, why do you call me lord? Am I not your liege and vassal to revere and serve and cherish you as my lady and my queen? But Iseult answered, no, you know that you are my lord and my master, and I your slave. Ah, why did I not sharpen those wounds of the wounded singer, or let die that dragon slayer in the grasses of the marsh? But then I did not know what I know now. And what is it that you know, Iseult? What is it that torments you? Ah, all that I know torments me, and all that I see. The sky and the sea torment me, and my body, and my life. She laid her arm upon Tristan's shoulder. The light of her eyes was drowned, and her lips trembled. He repeated, friend, what is it that torments you? The love of you, she said. Whereat he put his lips to hers. But as they thus tasted their first joy, Brangian that watched them stretched her arms and cried at their feet in tears. The lovers held each other. Life and desire trembled through their youth. Then Tristan said, well then, come death. And as evening fell upon the bark that heeled and ran to King Mark's land, they gave themselves up utterly to love. As King Mark came down to greet Iseult upon the shore, Tristan took her hand and led her to the king, and the king took seizing of her, taking her hand. He led her in great pomp to his castle of Tintagel, and as she came in hall amid the vassals, her beauty shone so that the walls were lit as they are lit at dawn. Then King Mark blessed those swallows which, by happy courtesy, had brought the hair of gold, and Tristan also he blessed. And on the 18th day, having called his barony together, he took Iseult to wife. But on the wedding night, Brangian, to conceal the queen's dishonor and save her from death, took her place in the nuptial couch. The loyal maid sacrificed the purity of her body to her friend in remorse of the poor watch she had kept at sea, and out of love of Iseult. The darkness of the night hid her trick and her shame from the king. Here the romancers insist that Brangian had not cast into the sea the flagon of spiced wine which the lovers had not quite emptied. That in the dawn, after her lady in turn had entered King Mark's bed, she poured into a cup what remained of the philtre and presented it to the pair, that Mark drank heavily of it, and that Iseult secretly threw her share away. But know, my lords, that these romancers have tampered with the tale and falsified it. They conceived this lie for the reason that they did not understand the marvelous love in which Mark ever held the queen. In truth, as you shall see, never, despite anguish, torment, and terrible reprisals, could Mark expel either Iseult or Tristan from his heart. Yet know that he had not drunk the spiced wine, neither poison nor sorcery, only the tender nobility of his heart moved him to love. Then Iseult lived as a queen, but lived in sadness. She had King Mark's tenderness and the baron's honor. The people also loved her. She passed her days amid the frescoes on the wall and floors all strewn with flowers. Good jewels had she, and purple cloth, and tapestry of Hungary and Thessaly too, and songs of harpers, and curtains upon which were worked leopards and eagles and popinjays, and all the beasts of sea and field. And her love too she had, love high and splendid, For, as is the custom among great lords, Tristan could ever be near her, at his leisure and his dalliance, night and day, for he slept in the king's chamber as great lords do among the lieges and the councillors. Not Brangian, who was faithful, not Brangian, but themselves had these lovers to fear, for hearts so stricken will lose their vigilance. Love pressed them hard as thirst presses the dying stag to the stream. Love dropped upon them from high heaven as a hawk slipped after long hunger falls right upon the bird. And love will not be hidden. Brangian indeed by her prudence saved them well. None ever surprised the queen in her lover's arms. But in every hour and place every man could see love terrible that rode them, and could see in these lovers their every sense overflowing, like new wine working in the vat. The 4 felons at court who had hated Tristan of old for his prowess watched the queen. They had guessed that great love, and they burnt with envy and hatred, and now a kind of evil joy. They planned to give news of their watching to the king, to see his tenderness turn to fury, Tristan thrust out or slain, and the queen in torment. For though they feared Tristan, their hatred mastered their fear. And on a day the 4 barons called King Mark to parley, and Andret said, "Fair king, your heart will be troubled, and we 4 also mourn, yet are we bound to tell you what we know. In vain we warned you. For the love of one man you have mocked ties of blood and all your barony. Learn, then, that Tristan loves the queen. It is truth proved, and many a word is passing on it now." The royal king shrank and answered, "Coward, when the Morholt offered combat to you all, you hung your heads and were dumb, and you trembled before him. But Tristan dared him for the honor of this land and took mortal wounds, therefore do you hate him. But what then have you seen or heard or known? Naught, Lord, save what your eyes could see or your ears hear. Look you and listen, sire, if there is yet time." And they left him to taste the poison. King Mark could not shake off the evil spell. Contrary to his heart, in his turn he kept watch on his nephew, kept watch on the queen. But Brangian, noting it, warned them both, and the king watched in vain. At last Duke Andret, whom God shame, said to his peers, "My lords, let us take counsel of Frosin the dwarf, for he knows the 7 arts and magic and every kind of charm. He will teach us, if he will, the wiles of Yseult the fair." In hate of beauty and of prowess, the little evil man drew signs for them and characters of sorcery. He cast the fortunes of the hour, and then at last he said, "Sirs, high good lords, this night shall you seize them both." Then they led the little wizard to the king, and he said, "Sire, bid your huntsmen leash the hounds and saddle the horses, proclaim a 7 days' hunt in the forest, and 7 nights abroad therein, and hang me high if you do not hear this night what converse Tristan holds." So did the king, unwillingly, and as the peers slept all round their king, their lord, that night a mad thought took Tristan, that before he rode, before dawn, he would say a last word to the queen, and there was a spear length in the darkness between them. Now the dwarf slept with the rest in the king's chamber, and when he thought that all slept, he rose and scattered flowers silently between the bed of Tristan and that of the queen. Should one of the lovers go to join the other, the flower would retain the imprint of his steps. But as he strewed it about, Tristan, who lay awake, saw him. Then Tristan rose in the darkness and judged the spear length and leapt the space between for his farewell. But that day in the hunt a boar had wounded him in the leg, and to his bad luck the wound was unbandaged, and in this effort bled. He did not feel it or see it in the darkness, but the blood dripped upon the couches and the flowers strewn between. And outside in the moonlight the dwarf read the heavens and knew that the lovers were together. He trembled with joy at the thought and cried, "Enter, my king, and if you do not find them together, hang me high." Then the king and the dwarf and the 4 felons ran in with lights and noise, and though Tristan had regained his place, there was blood for witness. And though Iseult feigned sleep who lay at Tristan's feet, yet there was the blood for witness. And the king looked in silence at the blood where it lay upon the bed and the boards and trampled into the flower. Dark was the night, and the news ran that Tristan and the queen were held, and that the king would kill them. And wealthy burgess or common man, they wept and ran to the palace, and the murmurs and the cries ran through the city, but such was the king's anger in his castle above, that not the strongest nor the proudest baron dared move him. Night ended and day drew near. Mark before dawn rode out to the place where he held pleas and judgment. He ordered the fire to be lit and Tristan to be called. The flames rose and all was silent before the flames, and the king waited. The servants ran to the room where watch was kept on the 2 lovers, and they dragged Tristan by his hands, which were bound with ropes. By God, it was vile to fetter him thus. He wept at the insult, but of what use were his tears? Ignominiously they marched him off, and the queen called after him, almost demented with anguish, "To be killed, friend, that you might live, that would be great joy." Now hear how full of pity God is. He, who does not desire the sinner's death, heard the lament and the prayers of the common people beseeching him for the tormented lovers. Near the road where Tristan passed was a chantry upon a rock. It stood at a cliff's edge, steep and sheer, and it turned to the sea breeze. Tristan said to those with him, "My lord, see you this chantry? Permit me to enter it. My death is near. I shall ask God that he have mercy on me who so offended him. There is but one door to the place, my lords, and each of you has his sword drawn. So you may well see that when my prayer to God is done, I must come past you again, when I have prayed God, my lords, for the last time." And one of the guards said, "Why, let him go in." So they let him enter to pray. But he, once in, dashed through and leapt the altar rail, and the altar too, and forced a window of the apse, and leapt again over the cliff's edge. So he might die, but not of the shameful death before the people. Now learn, my lords, how generous was God to him that day. The wind took Tristan's cloak, and he fell upon a smooth rock at the cliff's foot, which to this day the men of Cornwall call Tristan's Leap. His guard still waited for him at the chantry door, but vainly, for God was now his guard. And he ran, and the fine sand crunched under his feet, and far off he saw the faggot burning, and the smoke and the crackling flames, and fled. Sword girt and bridle loose, Cornwall had fled the city, lest the king burn him in his master's place, and he found Tristan on the shore. "Master," said Tristan, "God has saved me, but, oh, master, to what end? For without Yseult I may not, and I will not live, and I rather had died of my fall. I have escaped Yseult, and they will kill you. They will burn her for me, then I too will die for her." "Lord," said Cornwall, "take no counsel of anger. Let us hide here where the track passes. Good master, I have not got my sword. Here, I have brought it to you. Give it me, fair master. By the God in whom I believe, I go now to free my friend." "No," said Cornwall, "the very men who wish your freedom will be the first to strike you. Son, it is well said, folly is not prowess. Wait." There was a poor man of the common folk that had seen Tristan's fall, and had seen him stumble and rise after, and he crept to Tintagel and to Isolde where she was bound, and said, "Queen, weep no more, your friend has fled safely." "Then I thank God," said she, "and whether they bind or loose me, and whether they kill or spare me, I care but little now." When the news came to the king that Tristan had leapt that leap and was lost, he paled with anger and bade his men bring forth Iseult. They dragged her from the room, and she came before the crowd, held by her delicate hands from which blood dropped. And the crowd called, "Have pity on her, the loyal queen and honored. Surely they that gave her up brought mourning on us all, our curses on them." But the king's men dragged her to the thorn faggot as it blazed. Iseult stood up before the flame, and the crowd cried its anger and cursed the traitors and the king. None could see her without pity unless he had a felon's heart, she was so tightly bound. The tears ran down her face and fell upon her grey gown, where ran a little thread of gold, and a thread of gold was twined into her hair. Just then there had come up 100 lepers, deformed men with pitted and livid faces, limping on crutches to the clatter of hand rattles. They crowded to the stake, and under their swollen eyelids their bloodshot eyes gleamed at the sight. Yvain, the ugliest of them all, cried to the king in a piercing voice, "O king, you would burn this woman in that flame, and it is sound justice, but too swift, for very soon the fire will fall, and her ashes will very soon be scattered by the high wind, and her agony be done. Would you have me show you a worse punishment by which she would live, but in great shame and ever desiring death? Would you, king?" "Yes, life then for her, but in great shame and worse than death. I could love him who showed me such a torture." "Sire, in a few words here is my thought. See, I have 100 comrades here. Give Iseult to us so that we may have her in common. Our sickness fans our desires. Give her to your lepers. Never will a lady have come to a worse end. See, our rags stick to our sores that ooze. She who at your side delighted in rich stuffs trimmed with fur, in jewels, in halls decked with marble, she who enjoyed fine wines, marks of esteem and merriment, when she beholds the court of your lepers, when she has to enter our hovels and lie with us, then Iseult the fair, the beautiful, will recognize her sin and will regret this fine blackthorn fire." And as the king heard them, he stood a long time without moving. Then he ran to the queen and seized her by the hand, and she cried, "Burn me, rather burn me." But the king gave her up, and Yvain took her, and the 100 lepers pressed around. The sound of their cries and yelpings, all hearts melted for pity. But Yvain had an evil gladness, and dragged her out of the borough bounds with his hideous company. Now they took that road where Tristan lay in hiding, and Gorvenel said to him, "Son, here is your friend. Will you do naught?" Then Tristan mounted his horse and spurred it out of the bush. There are singers who sing that Tristan killed Yvain, but it is a lie. Too much a knight was he to kill such things. Gorvenel, indeed, snatching up an oak sapling, crashed it on Yvain's head till his blood ran down to his misshapen feet. Then Tristan took the queen. Henceforth near him she felt no further evil. He cut the cords that bound her arms so straitly, and he left the plain so that they plunged into the wood of Morrowiss. And there in the thick wood Tristan was as sure as in a castle keep. So in the depths of the wild wood began for the lovers that savage life which yet they loved very soon. The summer passed and the winter came. The two lovers lived all hidden in the hollow of a rock, and on the frozen earth the cold crisped their couch with dead leaves. In the strength of their love, neither one nor the other felt these mortal things. But when the open skies had come back with the springtime, they built a hut of green branches under the great trees. Tristan had known ever since his childhood that art by which a man may sing the song of birds in the woods, and at his fancy he would call as call the thrush, the blackbird, and the nightingale, and all winged things. And sometimes in reply very many birds would come onto the branches of his hut and sing their song full-throated in the new light. My lords, upon a summer day, when mowing is a little after Whitsuntide, as the birds sang dawn, Tristan left his hut and girt his sword on him, and took his bow, fail-nought, and went off to hunt in the wood. But before evening great evil was to fall on him, for no lovers ever loved so much or paid their love so dear. When Tristan came back broken by the heat, he embraced the queen. "Friend, where have you been?" "Hunting a hart," he said, "that wearied me. I would lie down and sleep." So she lay down, and he, and between them Tristan put his naked sword. To their good fortune they had kept on their clothes. On the queen's finger was that ring of gold with emeralds set therein, which Mark had given her on her bridal day. But her hand was so wasted that the ring hardly held. Thus they slept, one of Tristan's arms beneath the neck of his friend, the other stretched over her fair body, close together. Only their lips did not touch, and no wind blew and no leaves stirred, but through a crevice in the branches a sunbeam fell upon the face of Iseult, and it shone white like ice. Now a woodman found in the wood a place where the leaves were crushed, where the lovers had halted and slept, and he followed their track and found the hut, and saw them sleeping, and fled off, fearing the terrible awakening of that lord. He fled to Tintagel, and going up the stairs of the palace found the king. The woodman took him aside and said low down, "I have seen the queen and Tristan, and I feared and fled. Where saw you them?" "In a hut in Morrowis they slept side by side. Come swiftly and take your vengeance." "Go," said the king, "and await me at the forest edge where the red cross stands." The woodman went and sat himself beneath the red cross, God's curse on the spy. The king had saddled his horse and girt his sword and left the city alone. And as he rode alone, he thought, "If I find them, I will avenge this awful wrong." At the foot of the red cross, he came to the woodman and said, "Go first and lead me straight and quickly." The dark shade of the great trees wrapped them round, and as the king followed the spy, he felt his sword and trusted it for the great blows it had struck of old. Then the woodman said, "King, we are near." Then the king cast his cloak with its fine buckle of gold, and his tall frame grew plain. Drawing his sword from its sheath, he said again in his heart that they or he should die. He signed to the woodman to be gone. He came alone into the hut, sword bare, and watched them as they lay. But he saw that they were apart, and he wondered, because between them was the naked blade. Then he said to himself, "My God, I may not kill them. For all the time they have lived together in this wood, had it been with a mad love that they loved each other, would they have placed this sword between them? Does not all the world know that a naked sword separating two bodies is the proof and guardian of chastity? If they loved each other with a mad love, would they lie here so purely? No, I will not slay, for that would be treason and wrong. But I will do so that when they wake they may know that I found them here asleep and spared them, and that God had pity on them both." Then he softly withdrew the emerald ring which he had given the queen, and in its place the king put the ring which Iseult once had given him. Then he took up the sword which separated the lovers, the very one he recognized it, which had splintered in the skull of the Morholt, put his own in its place, quit the hut, and leapt into the saddle. Then in her sleep a vision came to Iseult. She seemed to be in a great wood, and 2 lions near her fought for her, and she gave a cry and woke. And at that cry Tristan woke, and made to seize his sword, and saw by the golden hilt that it was the king's. And the queen saw on her finger the king's ring, and she cried, "O my lord, woe is us! The king has found us here." And Tristan said, "He has taken my sword. He was alone, he took fright and has gone for succor. He will return and will burn us before the people. Let us fly." So they fled towards Wales, to the very edge of Wood of Morrowis. What sorrows love shall have caused them. After 3 days it happened that Tristan, in following a wounded deer far out into the wood, was caught by nightfall and took to thinking thus under the dark wood alone. It was not fear that moved the king. He had my sword, and I slept. I was at his mercy. He could have struck. He needed no succor. And if he wished to take me alive, why, having disarmed me, should he have left me his own sword? Oh, my father, I know you now. There was pardon in your heart, and tenderness and pity. It would have been much better had he killed me in my sleep. For till now I was hunted, and I could hate and forget. He had thrown Iseult to the lepers. She was no more his but mine. And now, by his compassion, he has awakened my heart and regained the queen. For queen she was at his side, but in this wood she lives a slave, and I waste her youth. I am the cause that she treads this ugly road. So now I cry to God the Lord, who is king of the world, and beg him to give me strength to yield back Iseult to King Mark. Within the hollow of thorns that was their resting place, Iseult the fair awaited Tristan's return. The golden ring that King Mark had slipped there glistened on her finger in the moonlight, and she thought, he that by the courtesy of his heart put on this ring is not the man who threw me to his lepers in his wrath. He is rather that compassionate Lord who, from the day I touched his shore, received me and protected. And he loved Tristan once, but I came, and see what I have done. He should have lived in the king's palace amid 100 squires who would have formed his suite and served him to win their spurs. But through me he has forgotten his knighthood and is hunted and exiled from the court, leading a random life. Just then she heard the feet of Tristan coming over the dead leaves and twigs. She came to meet him as was her wont, and Tristan saw her weeping. "Friend," said he, "if the king would keep you and drive me out, I would cross to the lowlands or to Brittany with Cornwall alone. But wherever I went, and always, queen, I should be yours. Nor would I have spoken thus, Iseult, but for the wretchedness you bear so long for my sake in this desert land." "Tristan," she said, "let us return to him, and cry mercy to the King of Heaven." As soon as darkness fell on the forest, Tristan took the road with Cornwall. At the gates of Tintagel he quit him. The sentinels on the walls sounded their bugles. He slipped into the moat and traversed the town at the peril of his life, and came beneath the window where the king slept. He called him gently, and Mark awoke and whispered, "Who are you that call me in the night at such an hour?" "Sire, I am Tristan. I bring you a writ and lay it here on the grating of this window. Have your response hung to the arm of the Red Cross." Then the king cried, "Nephew, nephew, for God's sake wait a while." He ran to the sill and cried thrice into the night, "Tristan, Tristan, Tristan, my son." But Tristan had fled and joined his squire. On the day chosen for the meeting, the field shone far with the rich tents of the barons. Through the forest, Tristan rode with Iseult. In fear of an ambush, he had worn his coat of mail beneath his rags. Suddenly, Tristan and Iseult came out at the forest's edge and caught sight of King Mark far off among his barony. "Friend," said Tristan, "there is the king, your lord, his knights and his men. They are coming towards us, and very soon we may not speak to each other again. By the God of power, I conjure you, if ever I send you a word, do you my bidding." "Friend," said Iseult, "on the day that I see the ring, nor tower, nor wall, nor stronghold will let me from doing the will of my friend." "Why then," he said, "Iseult, may God reward you." And he turned rein and went down towards the sea. But Iseult followed him with her eyes, and so long as he could yet be seen a long way off, she did not turn. Apart, the lovers could neither live nor die, for it was life and death together. And Tristan fled his sorrow through seas and islands and many lands. He fled his sorrow still by seas and islands, till at last he came back to his land of Lyonesse, and there Rohelt, the keeper of faith, welcomed him with happy tears and called him son. But he could not live in the peace of his own land, and he turned again and rode through kingdoms and through baronies, seeking adventure, from Lyonesse to the lowlands, from the lowlands on to the Germanies, through the Germanies and into Spain. And many lords he served, and many deeds did. But for 2 years no news came to him out of Cornwall, nor friend nor messenger. Then he thought, "I am weary, and my deeds profit me nothing. My lady is far off, and I shall never see her again. Or why for 2 years has she made no sign? Or why has she sent no messenger to find me as I wandered? I, in my turn, shall I never forget her who forgets me? Will I never find someone to heal me of my unhappiness?" Now it happened one day that, riding with Gorvenal alone, he came into the land of Brittany. They rode through a wasted plain of ruined walls and empty hamlets and burnt fields everywhere, and the earth deserted of men. On the 3rd day, at the hour of noon, they came near a hill where an old chantry stood, and close by a hermitage also. Tristan asked what wasted land that was, and the hermit answered, "Lord, it is Breton land which Duke Howell holds, and once it was rich in pasture and ploughland, with mills here, apple orchards there, and many small farms. But Count Ryal of Nantes has wasted it." And Tristan asked, "Can the Duke continue to wage this war?" And the hermit answered, "Hardly, my lord, yet his last keep of Carhaix holds out still." Tristan thanked him and rode hard to Carhaix. They welcomed him with honor, and Kaherdin, the duke's son, showed him the walls and the donjon keep with all their devices, and from the battlements he showed the plain where far away gleamed the tents of Count Ryal. And when they were down in the castle again, he said to Tristan, "Friend, let us go to the hall where my mother and sister sit." So, holding each other's hands, they came into the women's room, where the mother and the daughter sat together, weaving gold upon English cloth and singing a weaving song. And Tristan bowed to them, and they to him. Then Kaherdin said, "See, friend Tristan, how my sister's hands run thread of gold upon this cloth. Of right, good sister, are you called Iseult of the white hands." But Tristan, hearing her name, smiled and looked at her more gently. One day, as the dawn broke, a sentinel ran from the tower through the halls, crying, "Lords, you have slept too long! Rise, for an assault is on!" And knights and burgesses armed and ran to the walls, and saw helmets shining on the plain, and pennons streaming crimson like flames, and all the host of Ryal in its array. Now Tristan had armed himself among the last of those the sentinel had roused, and he mounted and spurred with shield on breast, crying, "Ca-hay!" Count Raoul came charging, rein free at Cahadin, but Tristan came in between. So they met, Tristan and Count Raoul. Tristan struck Raoul just where the helmet buckles, and it yielded, and the blow was struck so hard that the baron fell on hands and knees. Raoul regained his stand, but Tristan struck him down once more with a blow that split the helm. Then Raoul cried mercy and begged his life, and Tristan took his sword. Now when the victors were returned, Cahadin said to his father, "Sire, keep you Tristan. There is no better knight, and your land has need of such courage." So when the duke had taken counsel with his barons, he said to Tristan, "Friend, you have won my love, for I owe you my land. But I shall be quit with you if you will take my daughter, Iseult of the White Hands, who comes of kings and of queens and of dukes before them in blood. Take her, she is yours." And Tristan answered, "I will take her, sire." Ah, my lords, why did he speak that word? That word cost him his life. So the day was fixed, and the duke came with his friends, and Tristan with his, and before all, at the gate of the minster, Tristan wed Iseult of the White Hands, according to the church's law. But that same night, as Tristan's valets undressed him, it happened that in drawing his arm from the sleeve, they drew off and let fall from his finger the ring of green jasper, the ring of Iseult the fair. It sounded on the stones, and Tristan looked and saw it. Then his heart awoke, and he knew that he had done wrong. Now Iseult of the White Hands wondered to hear him sigh, lying at her side. A little shamed, she said at last, "Dear lord, have I hurt you in anything? Why do you not give me even a single kiss? Tell me the manner that I may know my fault, and I will make all amends that I can." But Tristan answered, "Friend, do not be angry with me. For once in another land I fought a foul dragon and was near to death, and I thought of the Mother of God, and I made a vow to her that, delivered from the dragon through her courtesy, would I ever wed, for 1 year I would abstain from embracing and kissing my wife. Since that is so, said Iseult, I will gladly endure it." But when in the morning the servants put the wimple of the married woman on her, she smiled sadly and thought how little right she had to this headdress. Then it happened that Tristan, riding to the aid of Cahadin, his brother-in-arms, was wounded by a blow from a spear, and this spear was poisoned. And Tristan weakened, the poison spread throughout his body, he paled and his bones showed. Then he knew that his life was going, and that he must die, and he had a desire to see once more Iseult the fair. But he could not seek her, for the sea would have killed him in his weakness, and how could Iseult come to him? And sad and suffering the poison, he awaited death. He called Cahadin secretly to tell him his pain, for they loved each other with a loyal love. And as he would have no one in the room save Cahadin, nor even in the neighboring rooms, Iseult of the White Hands began to wonder. She was afraid and wished to hear, and she came back and listened at the wall by Tristan's bed. And as she listened, one of her maids kept watch for her. Now, within, Tristan had gathered up his strength and had half risen, leaning against the wall, and Cahadin wept beside him. "Fair friend and gentle," said Tristan, "I am in a foreign land, where I have neither friend nor cousin save you, and you alone in this place have given me comfort. My life is going, and I wish to see once more Iseult the fair. By our comradeship I entreat you, undertake this errand for me, and if you carry my word, I will become your liege, and I will cherish you beyond all other men. And as Kaherdin saw Tristan broken down, his heart reproached him, and he said, Fair comrade, do not weep. I will do what you desire, even if it were risk of death, I would do it for you. And Tristan answered, Thank you, friend. This is my prayer. Take this ring, it is a sign between her and me. Tell her to remember our past time and our great sorrows. Tell her to remember the oath I swore to serve a single love, for I have kept that oath. But behind the wall, Iseult of the White Hands heard all these things, and she almost swooned. Tristan continued, Hasten, my friend, and tell your sister nothing, or tell her that you seek some doctor. Take my fine ship and 2 sails with you, one white and one black. And as you return, if you bring Iseult, hoist the white sail. But if you bring her not, the black. Now I have nothing more to say, but God guide you and bring you back safe. He sighed, wept, and bewailed his fate, and Kaherdin also wept, embraced Tristan, and took his leave. Standing by the wall, Iseult of the White Hands had overheard everything. How much she had loved Tristan. At last she learned of his love for another. She kept every word in mind. If only some day she could, how she would avenge herself on her whom he loved most in the world. But she hid it all, and when the doors were open again, she came to Tristan's bed and served him with food as a lover should, and spoke him gently, and kissed him on the lips. Tristan lay and longed for Iseult's coming. Nothing now filled him any more, and if he lived, it was only as awaiting her. And day by day he sent watchers to the came and to learn the color of her sail. There was no other thing left in his heart. He had himself carried to the cliff of the Penmarks, where it overlooks the sea, and all the daylight long he gazed far off over the water. Hear now a tale most sad and pitiful to all who love. Already was Iseult near. Already the cliff of the Penmark showed far away, and the ship ran heartily, when a storm wind rose on a sudden, and grew and struck the sail, and turned the ship all round about, and the sailors bore away, and sore against their will they ran before the wind. The wind raged, and big seas ran, and the air grew thick with darkness, and the ocean itself turned dark, and the rain drove in gusts. Then Iseult cried out, God does not will that I should live to see him, my love, once, even one time more. God wills my drowning in this sea. Oh, Tristan, had I spoken to you but once again, it is little I should have cared for a death come afterwards. My death is as nothing to me, since God wishes it, I accept it. May God bring us together, friend, or may I heal you, or may we both die of the same wound. And thus the queen complained so long as the storm endured, but after 5 days it died down. Kaherdin hoisted the sail, the white sail, right up to the very masthead with great joy, the white sail that Tristan might know its color from afar. And already Kaherdin saw Brittany far off like a cloud. But on that night Iseult dreamt this dream. that she held in her lap a boar's head which befouled her skirts with blood. Then she knew that she would never see her lover again alive. Tristan was now too weak to keep his watch from the cliff of the Penmarks, and for many long days within walls far from the shore he had mourned for Iseult because she did not come. Dolorous and alone he mourned and sighed in restlessness. He was near death from desire. At last the wind freshened, and the white sail showed. Then it was that Iseult of the white hands took her vengeance. She came to where Tristan lay, and she said, "Friend, Kaherdin is here. I have seen his ship upon the sea. She comes up hardly, yet I know her. May he bring that which shall heal thee, friend." And Tristan trembled and said, "Beautiful friend, you are sure that the ship is his indeed? Then tell me, what is the manner of the sail?" "I saw it plain and well. They have shaken it out and hoisted it very high, for they have little wind. For its color, why, it is black." And Tristan turned him to the wall and said, "I cannot keep this life of mine any longer." He said 3 times, "Iseult, my friend," and in saying it the 4th time, he died. Iseult the fair set foot upon the land. She heard loud mourning in the streets and the tolling of bells in the minsters and the chapel towers. She asked the people the meaning of the knell and of their tears. An old man said to her, "Lady, we suffer a great grief. Tristan, that was so loyal and so right, is dead." But Iseult, hearing them, could not answer them a word. She went up to the palace, following the way, and her cloak was random and wild. The Bretons marveled as she went, nor had they ever seen a woman of such beauty. And they said, "Who is she, or whence does she come?" Near Tristan, Iseult of the white hands crouched, maddened at the evil she had done, and calling and lamenting over the dead man. The other Iseult came in and said to her, "Lady, rise and let me come by him. I have more right to mourn him than have you, believe me. I loved him more." And when she had turned to the east and prayed God, she moved the body a little and lay down by the dead man beside her friend. She kissed his mouth and his face and clasped him closely, and so gave up her soul and died beside him of grief for her lover. The good singers of old time, Barul and Thomas of Bute, Gilbert and Gottfried, told this tale for lovers and none other, and they beg you for your prayers. They greet those who are cast down, and those in heart, those troubled and those filled with desire, those who are overjoyed and those disconsolate, all lovers. May all herein find strength against inconstancy, against unfairness and despite and loss and pain, and all the bitterness of loving.